Once they get a victim in hand, they'll have them online as quick as possible. I helped a particular agency here in North Carolina. One of my old partners was doing a social media scrub. The girl who was 14, I believe, had already popped up. He'd already found her on facial recognition. So it was approximately 13 hours from the time she left home. She was already being advertised for sale at a hotel at the age of 14.
This podcast contains real-world accounts and discussions related to law enforcement, military, criminal investigations, public safety incidents, and violent crime. Topics may include graphic descriptions, strong language, trauma, death, and emotionally intense subject matter, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey, welcome to the next edition of Behind the Thin Blue Line podcast. Today we're going to talk about a crime that is hidden in plain sight. When people hear human trafficking, most picture chains, cargo containers, or border crossings. The reality is far more uncomfortable. Human trafficking in America happens in strip malls, massage parlors, farms, construction sites, restaurants, private homes. It involves sex. It involves labor. And increasingly involves children, some who entered this country alone and were released into communities and are now unaccounted for. We're not talking about politics. We're talking about victims. We're talking about organized crime. Where did the system fail, and how do we fix it? I'm your host, Mark Bridgman, and this is Behind the Thin Blue Line. This podcast is built on 4 pillars: service, sacrifice, strength, and support. I spent more than 3 decades in law enforcement and criminal intelligence working violent crimes, narcotics, human trafficking, organized crime at both the local and federal levels. Behind the Thin Blue Line exists to bridge the gap between what the public hears and what law enforcement actually experiences through the real conversations, real context, real people. This episode is meant to inform, not sensationalize, to educate, not overwhelm. So let's get started. Our guest today is Bill Loucks Jr. Bill has worked human trafficking problem from multiple angles: law enforcement, intelligence, victim-centered investigations. He has served as a North Carolina senior investigator for Hope for Justice, conducting human trafficking investigations for a non-governmental organization focused on victim identification and exploitation networks. Prior to that, Bill spent more than a decade as narcotics gang detective with Metro Nashville Police Department. He's authored over 800 search warrants, participated in over 1,000 search warrant executions targeting complex criminal organizations. Bill has trained over 10,000 law enforcement officers and practitioners on controlled substances, gangs, human trafficking, and has testified as an expert witness in multiple courts on clandestine labs and gang structures. He brings more than 17,000 hours of investigative experience, including work involving transnational criminal organizations, complex trafficking networks. Before Bill was in law enforcement, he did 8.5 years at the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg, and he was a flight engineer with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, also known as the Night Stalkers. Currently, Bill works for the North Carolina Justice Academy as an instructor. Bill, I appreciate you being here and participating in this issue.
Appreciate you getting to come.
Okay, let's kind of like set the tone. What's the ground truth when it comes to human trafficking? What do people most misunderstood about human trafficking?
Everybody thinks somebody's going to get kidnapped and they're running to Mexico. The biggest misconception is kidnapping, and somebody's chained up and they're run to other countries. When in fact, kidnapping accounts for less than 1% of actual human trafficking here in the United States.
Wow, that's amazing. How often are victims of human trafficking encountered by law enforcement or regular people but not recognized that this is individuals being trafficked?
Every victim, every day. And that could be from a young child who's being trafficked by, in a familial case, maybe by an uncle, stepfather, something like that. And this child has to go to the doctor, pediatrician, urgent care, doc in the box, CVS Minute Clinic, or something like that. They're encompassed when they're at the store, if they get to go to the store. They're seen a lot of times at hotels. They're places where their actual trafficking events will actually occur. Some of these victims are seen daily by like teachers and stuff at school, especially if they're labor trafficking victims, which is a huge
When you say human trafficking events, what are you referring to?
like if they were, say, a sex trafficking victim, right?
Okay.
Every time that a sex buyer is involved, engaged with that individual, that's a separate event,
Okay.
a human
I got
trafficking event. But police, we often miss it because we don't understand it, and what we get nationally, it's not just here, it's nationally framework. What we get in our basic academies is very, very minimal. And when I teach it, I teach the human trafficking aspect from not only patrol, domestic violence, gang, narcotics, other detective realms, investigators, and I show 4 separate instances all the way back to 2004, which is the very first time I can account and understand and tell you for sure that I came into contact with 16 human trafficking victims at a call for service alarm call. And these were all male victims locked inside of a Chinese restaurant.
That's the other urban myth, that these are just girls that are being trafficked.
No, it's everybody is, the victims look like anything and everything, even though sex trafficking accounts for the largest percentage of human trafficking. And with that, females accounting for the largest percentage of that, but there is still labor trafficking in various forms. And it's not just a female, and it's not just a young female either.
Interesting. So what do you think the officers, what do they think they're seeing if they're coming across a victim of human trafficking? What's their perception? Do they just think it's another drug addict, or?
Most of the times it starts with a drug issue, and then it turns in, it's like spun into like a domestic or a drug issue. Where I teach it, I talk about my second FTO field training officer rotation in 2003, early 2004, working in a high crime area. Obviously, when you're going on FTO rotation, you don't go to the nice areas of town during the night shifts. And
nor should you.
Yeah. One of my female FTOs, she was actually pointing out all of what she classified and discussed as crackheads, addicts. They're just addicts and stuff like that, or a bunch of hookers and prostitutes. These were terms that I came to know as just, that's what it was in policing, because somebody's selling themselves. You didn't understand that they could potentially actually be forced into selling themselves.
Yeah, and working in Fayetteville for 26 years, when I was a brand new rookie on the streets, I had the area, still to this day, Eastern Boulevard, that area, downtown, that there's street level prostitution. Some of the girls had pimps, but I had no idea that they were being forced into that lifestyle or coerced into staying within that lifestyle.
And it was, for me, it was kind of like a learned thing. I had no understanding, because at the time in 2003, when I went through the academy, there was no human trafficking training. There was nothing out at the academies. And then to go to where you're talking about with a pimp and a prostitute, there is a difference between prostitution and actual human trafficking. And there are some prostitutes that are actually working for a pimp in protection of their own selling of themselves.
Right.
And stuff. So it's where we have to learn the distinct line in between it via the methods of force, fraud, and coercion, and be able to identify what that looks like in various aspects.
Okay. So give us a kind of a thumbnail sketch, a definition, if you would, of what human trafficking is.
Human trafficking is basically going to be the buying, selling, and or trading of human beings for sex acts and or labor. Okay. If it is for the purposes of sex trafficking, if a person enters into that commercial sex realm, that means there's some form of payment, whether it's for drugs or something like that, and they're being forced into it by a force, fraud, or coercion, they are under the age of 18, according to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, TVPA, by federal statute. That means they're under the age of 18, it's automatically human trafficking, automatically considered that. So when it comes to labor is use of force, fraud, or coercion by moving people around for labor purposes, it providing any provisions, transportation, services, hiding them. The transportation aspect, that one just came to light in national news with Albrego Garcia.
Yes.
Remember, Maryland dad. When in fact, I actually got to meet part of the unit that actually classified him as an MS-13 gang member, okay? Actual gang detectives. And Tennessee Highway Patrol does the traffic stop of him, and it has all the classic signs, multiple people inside the vehicle. Some of the stories match, some of them don't. They don't have their identification. One person is controlling basically everybody and anybody up front, and that's Albrego Garcia. He was transporting human trafficking victims from one place to another under the ruse of, oh, this is employment. And what made it worse during that whole stop was, as you know, we'll figure out a little bit throughout this, that language is often a barrier in working a lot of these cases. But as a Spanish-speaking officer started talking to Albrego, he all of a sudden he barely speaks Spanish now.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a clue.
Okay. Can't have it both ways.
That's a clue. Right now, labor trafficking is, a lot of people, when they think labor trafficking, are thinking, oh, that's somebody out here working under the visas and stuff like that, or some of the companies doing agricultural work or in the fields. That's not where we see a lot of our labor trafficking victims. We actually see our labor trafficking victims in places like hotel, hospitality industries, in the back end of restaurants, nail salons and stuff.
And it's somewhat seasonal too, do you think?
You do see them get moved around a little bit seasonal, but a lot of that seasonal is kind of heavily monitored, usually by some state Department of Agriculture or something like that. So they've got a good grasp on what they are looking for. Here in North Carolina, I think that division is run by Steve Troxler, and I know his Department of Agricultural folks. They are well versed and they know exactly what to look for out there on some of these farms. A lot of people, we used to get calls a lot of times working with a nonprofit group, Hope for Justice, for a little while. People would call and say, I drove by a field, saw a bunch of people. They all looked Mexican. They had a bus and a porta potty out there. I know they're human trafficking victims. I'm like, that's somebody taking his employees out to the field. They're working. Okay? Yeah. He's transporting them from one place to another. Yeah, that could be, but just because it's a bunch of Hispanics sitting in a field work, it doesn't mean it's going to be a human trafficking issue.
So why is physical movement not required to have human trafficking?
You can often keep somebody in one place to do the trafficking, i.e. we could be living at one of the better Red Roof Inn or Deluxe Inn hotels or something like that renting, and I never have to move my victim. I have everybody, all my sex buyers, come in to there. Once, if it is a labor trafficking victim, obviously like drugs, somebody has to get from point A to point B, but there's a point where they can stop and they can stay in place, because if I don't have to take you out in public, I don't have to have a lot of exposure for you. If I don't have to run you out of the hotel room a lot, that means the hotel staff, cleaning crews, managers aren't going to see a lot, so they're not going to get a lot of chances to talk to you and figure out, hey, something may be actually wrong with you.
I want the listening audience to kind of understand it's not necessarily trafficking like traffic going down the road. It's the sale of goods or services or labor or sex or whatever.
Right.
How do traffickers blur the line between choice and coercion, especially when they're adult victims?
So most victims, if you look at a victim, and I've found this just about in every single victim I've talked to, you can always look at a vulnerability that they have, that the trafficker has capitalized on, okay? So, for example, it could be a 14-year-old girl who ran away from home because mom's boyfriend is sexually abusing her. She's tired of it, but she's been talking with somebody online who says you shouldn't have to take that. Come stay with me. Now she's living at some gangster's house, and he is now out there selling her. He's going to make it sound like, hey, you've got a choice to do this, but you really ain't got a choice to do this. You're going to get paid. So there's always a mechanism of force, fraud, or coercion. It's up to us as law enforcement to actually document that and articulate that to make that a successful case.
And the documentation may come over a period of time.
It is. There's nothing clear cut, because you're talking about an actual true victim who is basically kind of at some point in time becomes trauma bonded with their actual trafficker, and they will try to protect them.
Almost like Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes, exactly. And for us, for police, we get the perception this person's just lying. It's like another domestic. She called, said he beat her. I took her downtown, got warrants. We served the warrants, arrested him. 2 nights later, they're back in bed together after the order of protection is gone. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. If you truly need help, then why would you lie about it? But we didn't understand what goes on mentally, the bondage chain that goes on to this person. This person is basically going to try to protect that trafficker, because historically, every time they come into contact with the police, they're getting arrested and or released, and the trafficker's like, did you say anything? And they're getting beat regardless.
Correct.
So
beat or tortured. I've worked cases where the victims are
absolutely
tortured in some way, shape, or form, using cigarettes. And
well, if it's a mechanism of force, a trafficker is not beyond any method of force.
So what concept, and this is where the education part comes in for the entire community, but especially first responders and law enforcement. You don't have to be a law enforcement officer to recognize the human trafficking aspect, but what's some of the confusion in the reporting and in the court systems that kind of like don't do this issue justice?
We have to start with where it starts. Going to start with police, okay? When you look nationally at our training on human trafficking in most academies, it's a lot of definitions, okay?
Yeah.
You might get a practical example, okay? Now, an officer gets, force, fraud, or coercion, but they don't identify and understand what force actually is, or what the fraud is, or what the coercion, what we like to call this or factor. So we're mislabeling this in reports. I can recall the first time I can even think back to a domestic. I can even point down to the street in Nashville, Duke Street in Nashville, as a young cop in 2005 going to a domestic call. Same house. We're there once every 2 weeks. Okay. Constant domestic, constant chaos, constant runaways, constant drug usage, alcoholism. But this time, for some reason, it resonated when the victim, because I determined the husband or the boyfriend is the primary aggressor, she tells me he beat me again, word for word, because I wouldn't F his drug dealer so he could get his meth. Right there, just that term, he beat me because I would not have sex with his drug dealer so he could, in payment for his meth. That is, she is describing the elements of force to me. I see the physical evidence on her. She is describing that her boyfriend is trying to sex traffic her in exchange for controlled substances. Had no idea of that. So I'm chalking it up like another domestic, just kind of writing it away and stuff. Now we look at beyond us. Then we go into the court system, the other half. When I talk to DAs and I ask them, do you understand completely human trafficking? Well, I know the definitions and I know where it is in the statute. Like, do you understand? Are you confident enough and capable enough that you could take a human trafficking case if you have a rock star investigator all the way through? And 95% of the prosecutors that I've talked to go, no, we'll plea it out. It's too messy, takes too long, plugs up the system.
Witnesses aren't credible.
And there's that's a whole separate ball of wax, the way they hit that, and it's because they're always going to have a past, and it's a problem. So that becomes very problematic in court, and that a lot of victims do not just plain out understand or recognize or have even accepted they're mentally, they haven't even gone, oh crap, I'm actually a victim. This isn't supposed to be happening to me. This man is forcing me to have sex with 20 people a day. If I don't, he beats me. But when I do, he takes me to Subway and buys me a sandwich and lets me sleep all night. And I get a shower and up to do it the next day. And if I don't do 20, then he's going to beat me. Okay. So there is a lot of confusion in the courts. Let's go a little bit beyond the courts. So we're talking about courts. I'll give you a hypothetical situation. So I got a son. We'll say his name is Hunter. Okay. Hunter may have a laptop maybe that's not working. He's got to take it to a laptop store. Get worked at. Come on. Think about where this level of human trafficking, it is up in D.C. with politicians. I mean, it has been shown and it was proven that Hunter Biden we have the actual canceled checks where that man wrote checks to an Eastern European human trafficking group buying human trafficking victims. Those checks went through his account through a legitimate legal financial institution. We have the finalized canceled checks at the end. Then Epstein comes up, and then he hangs himself in the most secure facility there is in the world. And then his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, gets prosecuted. One person with numerous victims, and it is still unclear to this day to the general public how many true victims there were. And this is where this kind of hits to the point. The sex buyer is anybody and everybody. Okay. It's a general person. It's a dad. It's a preacher. It's a firefighter. It's a cop. It's a politician. I don't care D or R. It's a judge. It's a referee.
It's a general.
Yes. So you cannot put down a general definition, say, oh, it's this age group, male, this much money, basically working in a factory. It is everybody. And we figure out that this kind of goes pretty deep because we just released Epstein files again, and we got nothing but black squares on paper. So that's another reason it gets confusing, because there's a lot of people who have hands somewhere. I'm not saying they were involved in human trafficking, but good Lord, it should have been proven that no, we didn't do anything. So it's a unique scope.
So, the sex trade in the United States, it's the oldest profession. It goes back to biblical times, but how is technology? Because I remember working back then, we called them escorts or prostitution cases, but now they would be labeled as human trafficking cases. We'd pull out the phone book, the Fayetteville, Cumberland County, flip through and order up girls through the phone book. Well, we don't have phone books anymore. So, how does technology really morph this into taking it to the next level?
Two phases. Number one, like you said, in our days, it was a phone book. It was a newspaper ad. Before caller ID, we could just dial it straight from the PD phone. After caller ID, we had to take dimes and go to a payphone. Some of our listeners will have to Google a payphone. But, now with the age of technology, everybody has a smart device. Even kids at some point in time are going to have an iPad, something in their hands, even at school, okay? So people are advertising anonymously, even though you can see their face and stuff on there, but they're using end-to-end peer encrypted, like WhatsApp numbers, signal devices. Then you end up going to meet them. So it's an easy thing to do on phone, but on the reverse side, it goes back to the old adage. I remember my grandma used to tell me, she was like, now, when you go outside, if you go outside the yard, somebody tries to pull up in a van and offer you candy, don't jump in there. And I'm like, come on, I've been fat since I was 3, Mark. If you'd have rolled up and said, Bill, jump in, had a bag of M&Ms right there, I'd have knocked you out of the driver's seat and said, I'm driving, let's roll. But now the trafficker, because of technology, they can reach to those kids because every kid is online right now. And I think kids under the age of 14, statistically, 79% of children under the age of 14 are online at least 17 times a week. Okay. So they're using apps that you and I generally don't understand. And when I teach parents, I'll show up social media apps that kids are currently using between the ages of 12 and 17. 99% of the parents in the room cannot identify everything just by the icon. They're like, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
So,
And kids nowadays think Facebook is for old people, which I don't argue with that because I'm old. So explain the boyfriend / grooming method. This is how a person that's luring somebody into that lifestyle, how would they do that?
trafficker will start to meet first. A lot of them are groomed online because it obviously, if you don't have a social media page, you didn't take pictures of your eggs and waffles this morning, do you really exist? Okay. According to younger generations. So because of that, a lot of kids are just wide open online, and they put silly stuff out online. Like they'll show a can of like Beanie Weenies or something, or pizza rolls on a plate. And they'll be like, thanks, Mom. You're working again tonight. I guess dinner's on me. Just by doing that post, that tells a trafficker, female, I can see in her profile, she looks like she's 16. Thanks, Mom. You're working late again. I guess dinner's on me. It sounds like Dad is nowhere in this pile. Single mom. Then that person's like, oh, that sucks that you have to eat that. Man, if you was with me, I'd make you steak. And somebody's like, oh, thank you. Yeah, that sucks. My mom's working. Or, you suck, Mom. I'm grounded again. Or just something like that. They put it out in the trafficker keys onto this. And we've interviewed traffickers post-arrest and done in-depth debriefings with them. This is what we got from the schematic. A lot of them would say, on average, I would put out like prior to COVID, 500 messages a day. Just copy, paste. Copy, paste. You look beautiful. You look beautiful. You look beautiful. On average, they would say I would get out of 500, 15% would respond back. Another 5% after that 15% would actually engage in a conversation. Post 2020, everything went digital at that point in time. And those traffickers were saying now I was pushing out 5,000 of those messages, and I was getting probably about a 70% return because everybody's locked in a home. Everybody's got a smart device. Schools were giving kids tablets to do, schoolwork from home. And believe it or not, I don't care what you think you could put in their firewalls wise. A 16, 17, 18-year-old kid understands internet, technology, coding better than a lot of IBM social engineers that are actually working on computers and stuff because they grew up in it.
Sure. Yeah.
You and I didn't. Pagers were a fantastic thing when they came out. Now I'm telling our age.
Why do the victims appear independent when they come into contact with law enforcement?
That's how the trafficker trains them. If this person looks like they are selling themselves, operating by themselves, then they suspect that police are only in the side of the room with the victim. Because of that, it lets them be anonymous, and they're like, she's going to get locked up. I'll come out, bond her out, and I'll beat her. She said anything. I know she ain't going to say nothing. If she does, she ain't going to have a place to stay, and she knows I'm going to hurt her again. So it's a mechanism that they use to try to protect them. Basically, that's their MO.
The education and training of first responders, officers, recognizing the signs of trafficking is really vital because oftentimes they look at these people as criminals, the trafficking victims as criminals, and more apt to arrest versus help and asking the right questions and getting them some resources.
And that becomes kind of like a double-edged sword. And here's why. For every victim that I would recover, that we would bring into safety, identify this person's look, said, I need help. This person's forced me to do this. We'd find them. We'd work with other NGOs, like Gate Beautiful is a fantastic one in Fayetteville. They would help us move these victims around place to place and get them into a program to start the rehabilitation process. But the average amount of times that a trafficker will return to their trafficker or the same trafficking situation with a different trafficker is approximately 7 times before they come out of it. So we have essentially had victims that we've rescued, called us, said, meet us somewhere. We need help. I need help. I'm tired of this. We've swooped them up, been able to corroborate everything, figure out truly that they're a victim, take them, get them to a safe place, and in transit, they just disappear or they leave the facility. Why do a lot of them get arrested? Well, because a lot of us don't identify as law enforcement. We're out here doing these human trafficking operations. We talk about human trafficking operations, and for me, we don't just put people out. Used to be in the old days, Vice would do prostitution operations.
Yeah.
And they come to roll call and pick the prettiest girls on the detail, stick them outside, walk them down the road, and let guys come up, try to buy them. Well, we figured out that's kind of bad because I've seen an officer actually get kidnapped in the process of this. One, so all we're doing is just repeatedly getting these Johns. But with these victims, when we get them and we do set up an operation, a lot of operations fail to collect what's going on the ground. So when you talked about like victims, why do they seem independent? Some of these victims are actually driven by an actual trafficker. Sometimes we would be up in the room. One of us would be doing the undercover. We've got a cover room. We got everything going on. We'd see a vehicle pull up, and a guy and a young girl. And then the guy would be talking to the girl, trying to coax her. A few times we would see the door open. He would actually yank her out of the car, smack her, bring her up to the door, point to the door for her to knock, and then walk in to our operation. Because of that, we were failing to recognize it's probably a victim. That's going to be the trafficker. But when she's up there going, no, he didn't make me do it. I needed to make money. It's just me and stuff like that. You can't force them into coming out of that situation. And then it's a double-edged sword because, yeah, they've committed a crime, but it's under force, fraud, or coercion. And then some command staff or prosecutors, and we try to always lead that to them, the prosecutors be like, lock them up, at least should be safe for a little bit. And I'm like, then that's a lot to undo. That's a whole lot to undo. And I've seen this numerous times. So a lot of these girls would get locked up continuously multiple times over. I remember one particular girl in Nashville off of Dickerson Pike. I probably arrested her 48 times just off of crack pipes of prostitution. I'd arrest her at the beginning of the shift for a crack pipe, and there we were just citing and releasing if they didn't have warrants. She'd get arrested on paper, told to come to court, and catch her 4 hours later having oral sex with somebody that she had due to just come in from another county. They'd be talking to her like, what is going on? Why can't you stop this? She was like, he will not let me. I had no idea. I was hearing this all the way back to 2004. I had a victim sitting behind me in the car in cuffs. Here I am resting on paper and hearing her tell me he'll beat me. And I'm like, you don't even live in this area of town. She had actually disappeared for a period of time and came back. And when she came back, she looked like she'd been hit by a car. This man had found her on the other side of Nashville, Davidson County. And Nashville's a big place. There's a little over a million people there too. He found her and brought her back to there. But to me, because I was like, wait, you're out here walking the streets. You're free. You could just leave if you want, not realizing that's actually not the case.
Right.
So a lot of them end up just getting arrested by a lack of training, understanding. A lot of the human trafficking operations kind of lack the proper resources just to take care of a victim on the spot. Also, like victim witness coordinators, social services, NGOs, a faith-based organization, somebody standing there with an extra couple sets of clothes to match this person and to take them somewhere other than a hotel, because most of their trafficking has been occurring at a hotel.
Correct.
Do I need to take this trafficker and put them into another hotel?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in NGOs that can provide that type of asset and resources are very far and few. And I can tell you two that I know, Hope for Justice, number one, and then Gate Beautiful. They're in Fayetteville. Two that anytime police have called, they've been able to react and assist them with something with a victim, whether it's a plane ticket. And me and my ex-partner, Jeff, he and I would pick up victims and actually put them on planes, buy plane tickets for them. If they didn't have identification, I can't put them on a plane ticket to like a human trafficking victim program, say in Orlando, Florida. So if they didn't have an ID, I can't put them through TSA.
Right.
So we partner with other NGOs that had private planes, and we would schedule with them saying, hey, I need somebody to get a plane here as quick as possible. And we would take them to municipal airport and do the handoff plane side at the ramp, put that victim on there to try to get them to the right place.
Yeah. So in your experience, from the time somebody is groomed, how quickly can the trafficker advertise and put that person out?
Once they get a victim in hand, have physical possession of them to get them to a place where they will actually be trafficked at, they'll have them online as quick as possible. Whether it's mega personal, skip the gangs, whatever the advertising platform is. So it's not like a long period of time at all. And in some cases, I've seen some runaways. And this is where we have to, from the law enforcement aspect, we've got to get a little bit better understanding on how fast a juvenile runaway can end up into a trafficking situation. Because most traffickers, most runaway juveniles are lured into some form of prostitution within, I think it's 1 out of 3, so 30%, and then within the first 48 hours running away from home. And most of them are running away from home because they're running away to meet with a trafficker who's providing or giving them a false promise of some other better life, better situation, better phone, better clothes.
Sure.
You know, that type of situation. I helped a particular agency here in North Carolina. One of my old partners was doing a social media scrub. The girl who was 14, I believe, had already popped up. He'd already found her on facial recognition. So it was approximately 13 hours from the time she left home. She was already being advertised for sale at a hotel at the age of 14.
So what are some of the behavioral cues, and why do they matter more than the physical signs?
Some of the behavioral cues, let's look at, say, juvenile. Juveniles, obviously, going through puberty, kids are going just through awkward changes. But if your child becomes extremely aggressive, they're now avoiding eye contact with you. They're being very protective with things like their phones and stuff like that. They are all of a sudden showing up with new clothes and stuff. That's something they didn't have in a behavioral pattern before. That should identify what is going on. Who are they trying to protect? Why are they hiding everything? Why are they clearing their internet history? Why is a 14-year-old clearing their internet history? As a parent, you should be digging into their phones.
Sure.
So if you look at all of these victims, especially our juvenile victims, there is a pattern of behavioral cues that a parent should have known or been able to recognize had they known what to look for. That would have told them something is going on. My child is gearing towards a behavioral pattern that is kind of common with somebody who's about to run away or get into a trafficking situation, or may be in a trafficking situation. They're just coming home at night. It may be the local gangsters are making him or her, have sex with multiple dudes, give oral sex, do all kinds of stuff and sex acts throughout the day at school, and they come home at the end of the night. And I should have been able to see that as a parent. Most people say, "Oh, that would never happen at my."
Yeah, of course.
It's never at my house.
Age-old denial.
Yeah, it's never at my house. I would be able to see it, until all of a sudden it's visible and the parents go, "I wish I would have known."
Yeah, and this leads into another level of human trafficking. Illicit massage businesses, aka massage parlors. How do these businesses operate? I know that working in and around Fayetteville most of my adult life. Sometimes they're in a storefront operation, sometimes they're in a house.
So illicit massage parlors are also known as Asian massage parlors. Most of these historically in the United States are run by Asians. Okay. It's people coming from China, South Korea, Vietnam, Asian continents and stuff. A lot of the victims start like they would they start in Asia as a human trafficking victim because somebody says, hey, I'll give you a job and a place to stay. If you come here to the U.S., you can make money with me at my place. And then the family willingly sends them. And they come here, and then as soon as they land in basically one or two places you see most of these victims land, Flushing, New York, or coming out of Los Angeles, then they end up into a circulation, run into this pipeline. Somebody who's supposed to receive them here in the U.S. basically takes their identification and, hey, you're going to live in this house with these girls. You're going to work in this massage parlor. You're going to give massages to these guys, and you do whatever they want. If you don't do it, then you will not get paid, that type of thing. Most of these are storefront, like you said, storefront operations. When you look at it, a massage parlor, IMP or AMP, is absolutely different than the spa that you may take your wife to or something like that. Like I've taken my wife to spa retreats. But when I look at these spa retreats, I don't find the actual listing for it on something like Rub Maps or IMP reviews,
Right.
illicit massage parlor reviews. Most of these places are cash only businesses. Men walk in and it's 100% men. They walk in, they're listed as the business. They'll say like $120 for the fee. Well, the $120 is basically like your entry fee. Okay, you go in, they'll start doing some crappy massage on you. They tell you for an hour. After about 30 minutes, they'll tell you to flip, and that's where they will start to negotiate sex acts, whether it's oral sex, straight up sex. They use acronyms for everything from girlfriend experience to all kinds of just off the wall craziness. And then from there, once the male's doing that, he's already laying there naked. He is paying them and giving them a tip for whatever sexual services they are. So they're very prevalent. They're very hard to deal with because there's very much a language barrier. Again, if I look at the percentage of officers that speak Spanish, maybe 2%. If I dig down into somebody who speaks some Asian dialect, especially like Mandarin or something like that, which is one of the major languages that we see with the victims at these massage parlors, less than 1% of police. So now you've got to work on some form of a translator out there. And so basically a man goes in, pays money, pays that house fee up front, goes in, they start a massage, they go back to a private room somewhere, and after about 30 minutes, they call it the flip. That's when the woman will try to start coaxing and trying to get tips and stuff like that from them, and then they'll end up having sex with them. It's very huge, prominent if you think about Fayetteville, but the girls there are often kept there and they're moved. If you see girls there for a period of time, on average, at the most, I've seen them leave the victims at one location for about 21 days. They'll start just moving. They may go for Fayetteville, and all of a sudden, boom, they go to Raleigh, boom,
So
they
they
go to
have
Charlotte.
a circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. Then they'll go into Rock Hill, South Carolina. Then they'll hit Greenville, South Carolina, and they'll start hitting other states and big cities. A guy will go in there, he'll get naked, he'll go through the process while he's down getting massage. Somebody's standing on his back. She's probably in a pair of thongs just rubbing up and down his back and stuff like that. And then someone else is looking at his wallet, knowing his name. And then when they start talking and saying, hey, like it's going to cost you $120 or $80 or $100 for this, he's like, no. And she's like, Ted Anderson of 112 Main Street, yes, it is going to be. They've already rifled through the ID.
Gotcha.
And looked at it. They're not going to say, hey, I'm going to report you, because they would be telling on themselves essentially. But they'll try to let them know, hey, we've already looked at what you have going on there. And unfortunately, we learned that in undercover operations, doing those operations. From my own aspect, like, it's weird seeing on camera, you're laying there and another masseuse comes in and starts rifling through your undercover wallet. And I'm like, whoa. Who is she? And I'm like, well, we just learned something today.
Yep. So what are some of the red flags communities look for?
All right. Number one, massage businesses. Massage businesses, if you're thinking about it in the legitimate spa aspect, you generally see male and female customers. And they're oftentimes, unless it's like foot rub places and stuff like that, you'll see those in like malls, inside of malls and stuff. If you see just dudes, men only, coming in, that's a clue. If the dudes are pulling up to the business, instead of pulling into the business, say the store's here, but they pull into the Tiger Mart Exxon gas station 2 doors down and they park in front of the store, then get out and then walk through there, that's another clue. Okay. You walk by the darn thing and it says men only on the door. Well, another huge clue to look at. So that's the biggest thing. Nothing but dudes. They're parking in unique places. You're going to see the same time patterns of them going in, 30 to 90 minutes, on average 60 minutes is their time frame and stuff. But the other thing is a bunch of dudes parking at different places and they can't just walk straight in. They have to get buzzed in. I've seen some places where I've walked up, buzzed in at the door. Lady opens the door. She looks at me, looks left to right, and it goes, and it closes the door and makes a motion for me to go around, and I have to go into the back door of the business. No pun intended. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, okay, there's nothing shady about that. And I guess. So those are things to constantly look for there.
So are these massage parlors like franchises? Are they under control, under like one group? Or they could be, or could they be independent? Or both?
Some of them are independent. Most of them have like some nexus. Like the controlled substance world has the nexus to the cartels or transnational criminal organizations. Most of these IMPs or AMPs are run by the Asian criminal organizations. That is the version of the cartels for Asia and the money laundering realm of the cartels. So they are basically run by the Asian criminal organizations, and they are headquartered. If you take the U.S., draw a line straight down the map, the left side, the West Coast, is headquartered in Los Angeles, California. The right side is headquartered Flushing, New York. So there's always a continuous money network that's going on. Very few of them are independent. The independents don't seem to stay in business a whole lot. But a lot of these places too, they're getting away from the little bit brick and mortar kind of stuff. They're morphing to what they call Asian apartment massage parlors.
Wow.
So instead of you going to that business plaza now, you're going to have to kind of do some follow-up and prove who you are. So for our business, from the undercover aspect, you've got to have something, and they're going to show a work ID saying I work for Johnston Construction Company. They're going to want a phone number. They're going to be Googling Johnston Construction Company. They're going to be calling Johnston Construction Company to verify you're actually working for Johnston. And then they'll start telling you an area to drive to. When you get to that area to drive to, then they'll dial you into an apartment complex. And then they'll put you in, tell you which apartment to actually go into. And they call it a better setting, the more what they call a GFE, girlfriend experience, more intimate. A lot of the victims in there are younger. They're not like what they classify or call mama-sans, the older ladies who are basically running the businesses. These are usually younger girls, stuff like China, South Korea, and stuff like that, between ages of 20 and probably 30 on average.
Interesting. How do these businesses survive repeated complaints?
It's hard to investigate these because to do an actual undercover case on one of these, this becomes a unique operation because you are not going to be able to go in and propose, get to the point where you're about to have them try to offer you sex. You're sitting there in your underwear. Okay. So this means in an undercover role, this becomes a very dynamic thing because as the undercovers, you're naked. Okay. So think about me coming to you as a vice unit. You're my captain saying, hey, we're going to do an investigation night on illicit massage parlor. Just to let you know, 6 of my guys could be naked. As a captain, you're going to be like, hold up, Bill. What? No, hold on. Okay. So the DA's got to be on board. My undercovers have to be specifically trained. So to even get to that point, it takes a little bit. So we try to look at them from a regulatory aspect. In the state of North Carolina, you have to have a license to be a masseuse. Okay. There is a regulatory board that comes out and looks at that. But there's one guy for the state that'll go in and actually pose for that regulatory board like he's an actual sex buyer. One guy that does that. So that's how they scave on the complaints. Sure. Because we go in and we're like knocking on doors, please, business check.
Yeah.
Unless you're hearing sex actually happen, you're not going to see anything. So, and a lot of cops don't understand, a lot of cops are actually getting into these places. A few of them are doing business checks, and they're like, well, I went to the counter and talked to them. I didn't see anything. And I'm like, ain't nobody having sex at the counter.
Right.
It's back in those rooms.
Yeah.
Did you go back while you're wearing your body camera to collect that evidence, kind of shot a line around and see where all of that stuff is going, which is going to be in the trash can? That's the number one thing. So that's why we miss this a lot of times on these complaints, because nobody knows actually where to go. They stop at the counter or they do a quick walkthrough. And I'm like, what did you see? Oh, I saw some rows of tables. You look at the trash cans? You look at other things that are going on there?
Yep.
Well, no. I'm like, why not? So you're going to see the same thing in strip clubs if we're going in to do business checks and stuff. That's another aspect of human trafficking where the stuff goes on. If I'm putting a uniformed cop in there, I want them to get into that deep, dark room where those private dances are as quickly as possible and try to look for that evidence. And most of that evidence is going to be sitting out in trash cans and stuff like that, you know.
Now, where's the money flowing? Anywhere USA, depending on which side of the Mississippi. So it goes to either Los Angeles or Flushing, New York, and then China.
Gets pushed right
so
back.
So it's all cash until it gets to Flushing.
Yep. And then they start moving their courier systems, and that's a whole separate schematic of money laundering and money movement stuff.
When the feds go after these massage parlors, what type of cases are they making?
If you look at it, if I take 100 federal, what's supposed to start off as a human trafficking case, an illicit massage parlor, they end up as prostitution. It's not, we don't do a lot of legwork. A lot of these victims, when it comes to the Asian community is different than, say, my gangsters. My gangsters on the street, you know, the whole concept of snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
Well, you tell on everybody, man, you go get put down. Everybody rolls on the streets. In this community, if I've sent you to the U.S., even if you're working in that, they won't tell because it brings cultural shame. And this is the way it's been explained by only 2 people that I've ever seen interview and actually talk about it. So culturally, people just don't break. I have seen out of all these federal cases, one victim successfully talked. The rest of the time, they're just like, no. I've actually watched a case in South Carolina, actually reviewing the video as investigators, because I got to train these guys as they were starting up the case. And the investigator that I trained, the boy crapped in a swinging bucket, best way to put it. He starts the investigation looking at a illicit massage parlor just after I taught him his class. Within 2 weeks, he already has HSI involved, and they already have a money flow into Beijing, China.
Nice. Because
as I'm talking to him on the phone, he was like, man, there's a white Porsche that just showed up. It's got New York plates on it. And I was like, is it got just one guy in there? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, bro, just sit there. Take pictures. Follow that guy for a little bit. As he goes in and stays in there less than 5 minutes and leaves, he's going to walk out with a bag in his hand. It's a money man. That's the man running the money. He's just going state. Pick up. Goes to a place, dumps some money, whatever financial institution or whatever remittance method that they're using, and it just funnels right back into there. But as they were in there working that case, even with feds standing there, the lady who was arrested, she said, you come back here, I give you massage, literally trying to pull the body armor off of one of the feds. But there was 5 victims in there, and none of the girls talked. None.
Yeah.
So that one those are kind of hard because it's a very hard group to penetrate within the Asian community. It's very language restrictive, and it does bring there's a cultural piece where a lot of people just won't do anything. And I can tell you, I've seen 5 human trafficking victims, had them in hand, 2011 in Nashville, roadside, on a bus that originated from a phone call from Flushing, New York with Oriental Pearl Express. And we were looking at from a money laundering aspect, and we recovered something like $227,000 out of the bus. But there was 5 human trafficking victims that I know now were actual human trafficking victims. Had zero idea, had them in hand. I couldn't tell you their status, where they're at, but I know those girls 100% were sex trafficking victims, down to the mama-san who was controlling every bit of their movements.
Next time on Behind the Thin Blue Line.
When you look at labor trafficking, it's generally somebody of foreign descent against another non-American citizen. Like the 16 men that I dealt with that were all Hispanic, it was an Asian male who had them locked in a restaurant. So a lot of people don't want to get involved. It may look racial or something like that. If you see something, say something. That's all you got to do.
Sponsored by the North Carolina Gang Investigators Association.
An Ironic Media production. Visit us at ironickmedia.com.